Here you go.
Are we live?
No, I think so.
I wonder is the sound working on this one? Oh, actually, I don't think it is. 1, 2. It's a bit like that one there, isn't it? You'd have to change.
That's just mute, is it? Yeah, it's picking up.
Yeah, but you're muting the computer, not the. Anyone give us a sound check? We have one person on. Hello, one person. Can one person hear us?
Oh, we can sound check ourselves. Hang on. Oh.
La, da, da, da. We're looking for a sound check. Looking for a medical check soon. Okay. We sound?
There you are.
No, go back in. Sorry. What sound was it? The computer or the mic?
Sure, we've no idea.
Well, you'll know if you play it.
How would I know from this?
You'll tell. 1 second. Because we can turn it off from here if we have to.
There you are.
No, go back in. Sorry. What sound was it? The computer or the mic?
Sure, we've no idea.
Well, you'll know if you play it. Okay, 1 second now.
How would I know from this?
We can turn it off. We have to. 1, 2. Okay, if I talk now, because that one time I was shouting into the mic, God, with people looking at us, 2 Egypts. One, two. Okay, if I talk now, because that one time I was shouting into the mic, God, that's not working from that one. 2 Egypts. That's unfortunate. What time we got? We got 2 or 3 minutes. 3 minutes. We're just going to try to get the mic. That's not working from that one. That's unfortunate. Not sure how to do that. What time we got? We got 2 or 3 minutes. 3 minutes.
Yeah, you might just have to leave that, to be honest.
Looking that way, I wouldn't go out of there anyway. Just going to try to get the mic.
Sounds okay anyway.
Yeah, I see.
After all that.
After all of that.
I'd have to go back around into the, you know what I mean, the whole setup.
Why, what's at the back of it? It's only wires, isn't there?
No, not that. I'm saying that.
Yeah. After all of that. I can put that thing off. I'll put it on silent because I had a double echo.
Right, can you do that? Because I don't know.
No, just mute it from there.
Oh.
Just turn the sound down so you can get the live comments if you want to.
I get you.
Anyhow, we've started now another couple of minutes, and it's part of this weekly talk we're doing live, and we're taking questions. No complicated ones. No intelligent ones either, please.
No, especially not today.
Just names and what we like and all that kind of stuff. Keep it simple. Why, what's wrong with today?
Because I was a bit worse for you, wasn't I?
Oh, yeah?
Mm.
From?
Out last night.
5 o'clock in the evening talking about alcohol. Hope no kids watching. So embarrassed. Dylan has a bit of a hangover. That's all wrong with Dylan. He'll be perfectly fine. Won't you?
Yeah.
Good man. What are we going to talk about? I'll start a minute. It's okay, please.
The picture.
The picture. Who's that warrior? As in what?
I think that's McMurrough fella. I think that's the King of Leinster in about the 13th century. He had a horse that was worth something like several hundred cattle. That's taken from there was an original picture. That's
Every traveller has a horse like that, don't you, lads?
Yes, that was a redrawn of an image, but it was actually it's reasonably accurate because it's drawn after an image that was an original done at the time.
How did it work back then? I know this has been off cue at the moment, a few seconds, but that was equivalent to taking a picture.
Note the saffron.
Was it?
Yeah, this is a 19th century. This is a later, like 20th or 19th century redrawn of a picture from the 13th century.
So the original one was
the original one has got no it's not like 3D, if you know what I mean. It's like flat. It looks like a carpet or something. Oh Jesus.
Shut up out there.
I have to switch that computer. Next time that computer is going to be muted.
I was on it last week before and started shouting danger, danger.
I know. I haven't got it under control yet.
That was a technical fault, wasn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Good. That's cleared up.
I don't train it to do that. That's the King of Leinster in the 13th century. That was, I think he was on his way to meet the King.
I'll tell you what, we're going to talk about him next week because we're live and it's 5 o'clock.
All right, okay.
You're only 30 seconds.
But he's an Irish warrior. That's the whole point. That's actually relevant.
He's my cousin, actually. I wouldn't. Of course, I know.
Yeah.
No, I'm just joking. Okay, welcome to Trav Vision History. You're joined with Dylan Foley, who's an investigative archaeologist and has come to 20 years of experience. Now, he emailed me the other night to say a long list of nice stuff about him, but I couldn't find the email. So I'm going to shorten with that. Dylan, how are you?
Grant, good.
Good. Now, just before we get kickstarted into it, I'm going to say why we're here again. My name is Bernard Winnie. I'm an Irish traveller and I grew up in Sligo. And my own opinions and experiences are my own pretty much. I don't claim to represent a traveller community as a whole. I don't claim to know anything and everything about much. But my own, I suppose, many realities that I've lived through this life, from what I do know, what I've learned, and what I am learning, has helped me to shape this worldview. Doesn't mean that it's the correct one, the right one, but it's definitely my one. And it's one I feel that was born outside of settled mentality. A lot of travelers can relate to that, as in sometimes we seem to have two different worlds operating at the same time. They never understand us, they never seem to get it. And vice versa, when we're trying to explain it, it's like there's not enough that can come out quick enough because there's just hundreds of years of stuff to talk about. So again, why we're here is again around traveler mental health. We're very aware of the high levels of suicide. This particular team is called Slashhooks and Samurai Swords. At the end of it, I'm going to talk about traveler conflict and maybe some solutions or ideas or some way of opening up to a more general conversation as opposed to not talking about it because it doesn't seem to be going away. And it's one we need to address, but it's not just inclusive of travelers. You'll find it right across the world and various indigenous ethnic groups and how we all have something in common and how the settlement mentality is connected to an English-speaking world through colonialism. That's a bit heavy starting off, but anyhow, I'm going to introduce you first to Dylan Foley, as I did a minute ago, but I'll give another introduction and he's going to tell us a little bit about Japanese culture. Why is Japanese culture and Irish culture? Is there a connection? Are they related? Why are we talking about Japanese culture, my friend?
Well, they're not directly connected. Let me just get out of the way. Obviously, they're a long way from each other. I don't need to tell people that. But they do have some things in common. There's reasons why, let me put it this way, because it's difficult for us sometimes to imagine what Irish society was like before the conquest that we talk about all the time, isn't it? Before the 16th century.
With all respect, your community, yeah.
Our community, yes. Yeah, exactly. So in order to recreate that, people are more familiar with Japan to some extent, but there are good reasons why society in Japan, the old type of society in Japan, had certain similarities to Ireland. I suppose just to say some quick points would be that Japan is an island, a collection of islands off of a large landmass. We're kind of in the same boat to some extent. So the way influences, we have long indigenous histories, if you know what I mean.
Japan is a bit like Ireland on the map, but except for Japan is 3,000 kilometers in length.
Yeah.
But it kind of has that island. It is an island.
It's a series of islands. It's a lot bigger. I mean, it's but it's very mountainous and what have you. But it's it's got that mix of isolation and openness that comes with being an island. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The population on the island tends to be the same for thousands of years, but then again, people also influences come from outside. And I think we'll be talking, won't we? Because we see it that later. It's important. Japanese society had evolved in ways that were, in some ways, very different to Ireland, but in some ways very similar. So when we're talking about things like clans and things like that, then we can look at Japanese society in the same way, and particularly a society where the moral kind of codes of warriors was one that was at the forefront. That's very the same in Ireland, where we have a system of honor, and I think most people would be familiar who've watched any Japanese samurai movies or things like that would know that honor is one of them things that's at the forefront in that kind of society. You know, and Irish society, Gaelic society is very similar. The face and honor and things. We'll go into that further in a minute. But I'll just say one thing as well, that behind all of that, there's deeper reasons why Japan and Ireland are somewhat similar. There's survival of very ancient religious beliefs and things like that. They're kind of melding. In Japan, they became Shinto as the old pagan beliefs. They call them pagan. I shouldn't use that word really, but you know, the ancient kind of traditional beliefs about spirits and animals and the way that the world worked, the very, very old beliefs going back to the sort of Stone Age, survived, melded to, that involves holy wells, holy mountains, spirits in the trees, this kind of thing, the landscape being alive to some extent. And
wasn't paganism a bit like using the word savage? If you were from a Christian tone mentality, yes. Every other religion was called paganism, wasn't it? More or less.
It was. And actually, it's interesting because it's a bit like we talked about last week. The word pagan literally means country dweller.
Country dweller.
Yeah, it's a city. It's the urban thing that we talk about.
It's meant to be sounded like a very bad. And was an Irish paganism slightly different or off from the rest of other religious?
Well, it might not be the pagan, but the Christianity is, because in Ireland, Christianity comes not under the Roman system of empire, so it's not imposed from the top down.
And Rome never got here?
No. So a monastic Christianization, which we're not going to go into in big depth, but I just want to say very quickly that Christianity in Ireland got melded to the older beliefs in Ireland. They didn't go away. They got blended together because it came in a certain way, with involving monasteries and monks and stuff. And it was much more similar to...
More organic, was it?
That very early form of Christianity was a lot more similar to what we would now know as Buddhism in places like Japan, where it got melded. Buddhism in Japan got melded with Shinto. So both types of beliefs continued, and the monasteries continued, and, you know, but also the old warrior codes continued, if you know what I mean. There's a lot of that island thing, and what makes us a little bit similar is that despite the changes and people coming into the country, a lot of things continue for a long time because we're also a little bit isolated.
And the other thing, I suppose, what caught my interest in this was because obviously the clans, and Dylan's going to talk about that, the honour, but I will start thinking about it, that if we had a very similar starting point, as in we had our clans, we had our system, it was 3,000 years old, and all that goes with that. Outsiders came to our shores, but in Japan, they closed the doors and were cut off from the European world for 200 years, allowed to have a natural environment of culture and so on and so forth. Ireland was constantly under battle and had been colonised. So the clan system was just about all but wiped out, except for Irish travellers to this point. That's what the connections they're making. That we had a similarity. So the outcome, I suppose, when we look at Japan's economy, I'm an economist now all of a sudden, but when we Google it, and it says it's the second largest economy in the world. It has a multitude of different arts that are very popular around the world. We could have had much the same in Ireland today if we reclaimed that history as Japan has today. Sorry now for the rant, but
yeah, okay. So they have a continuity they weren't colonized in the same way. No, the Mongols made 2 attempts at it and failed. So that didn't happen in the same way. And
just to add, just because we are talking about warriors and clans, we didn't fail either with the English conquest. We're still here. We took the language, we own it now. But also with that, we had multitude of victories against those who previously had come.
That's very true.
Yeah, I just wanted to get through. And one more thing.
I said it the other way around. The Mongols were the ones that failed, not the Japanese.
Yeah.
They tried to invade.
That's right.
Yeah. So we could say that.
And just another thing, if you were from Japan and we're talking about your culture, I hope we do it justice. We're not claiming to be experts on Japanese culture. There'd be no possible way only to have an outside perspective. But I hope we do it justice. And yeah, and if we don't, his name is Dylan Foley.
Feel free to. I think that we're very familiar with the media of the image of samurai is known all over the world. You know what I mean? And I think that what's not well known is that Irish society has a lot of elements very similar in that regard. The Japanese society was divided into many small territories, each under the leadership of military clans that were the top end of society was mostly military caste.
That's identical of Ireland had.
That's exactly the same in Ireland.
And that was different from what the British had.
Very different, yes.
Yeah, opposites almost. So Japan
they had a very
more
centralized state. We had a dispersed one where there's lots of little, I think in Japan they're called Han, and they have lords called daimyo. So it's a different system, more feudal. Ireland's again got the subtle differences. The laws in Ireland are very different to Japan. So let's be clear about that. The concepts.
The similarity, but then they're defined also by legal definitions of what is and what isn't, kind of thing. It's completely different in legal terms, right?
It's different in legal terms, yeah. But the concepts of honor and the way our society is organized into clans is very, very similar. The big families are, as we know, the big families organized into the major families, and then their satellites and the dynasties that are created from that are either in power or lose power. And the politics is played out on the field of battle quite often, but in a sense, it's all down to the honor of the clans themselves is what's driving the whole system. And in a system like that, merchants are at the bottom of this, in a sense, at the bottom. They're not at the top of society. So it's the opposite way around to the urban.
There's nothing wrong with that. It sounds like a case it was a class thing. Sometimes not everybody can be a warrior, doesn't want to be a warrior, or not cut out to be a warrior. Somebody had to go somewhere. Would that be it?
Yes, well, there was other jobs available.
Yeah.
Those clans also produced, many artists and other people. It's just that we're talking about a mentality. When we're talking about mentalities, we're talking about a society where that it didn't have a centralized system there was no centralized army, no centralized police. So each little territory had a little version of them. And the people within those territories, the free people of those territories, if you want to put it that way, the clans that were in control of those territories bore arms. And the whole thing was organized along what we call Brehon law now, but it's called Féinicus, our law originally, which sets out the way that things are done between clans of warriors, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And in a very specific way. Actually, it signs an honor price, as we call it. It's called Éanach Lan, I think, or it means face price, literally, if you translate it. But it literally means so that people don't lose face, or that they pay.
More common word we use now, the common language would be face value.
Yeah.
Would be kind of a bit of a spin. It sounds pretty much like that.
Yeah, so insults are, the law would set out like how insults are dealt with. Now, at the end of the day, they could be combat, could happen if the courts can't come to a decision, or come to a decision that nobody agrees with or something. The field of battle, obviously, is a different thing amongst warriors. If people are killed in fair battle, that's not subject to penalty in the same way. But
very equivalent would have a duel.
Yes, a duel.
Out,
Same thing existed in English society until the 18th century. So let's not pretend that they were somehow not doing the same thing. They also recognized single combat and things like that as being fair enough for a certain class of society.
Well, they weren't even doing the same thing, and that's what I'm trying to stand and correct you, is because the samurais were part of a warrior class. They took great honor in fight.
Yes.
Their duels was the guy who had a gun and tried to shoot you.
That's right. And that's where we come around to another interesting thing. As you know, the whole point of those warrior traditions, and I suppose we should say something, shouldn't we? Remember we were talking, what was that film we were talking about? The difference between a soldier and a warrior.
Samurai, Last Samurai?
The Last Samurai.
Oh yeah, well, what's his name again? Tom Cruise, if you're watching this, mate, give us a shout, because we've got another story for you.
Yeah.
the different mentalities. I suppose when Dylan was telling me about the Japanese culture, it's almost identical to traveller culture, even today, right? The whole warriors, the clans, the honour. So that's why I was very connected to this part of it. But also, something happened in Japan, and then something didn't happen in Japan. Something happened in Ireland, but never stopped happening in Ireland. I'm not trying to confuse you, but Japan were met by Europeans.
Oh yeah, so we should make that clear. The gun changed for the whole world. The weapon that changed the world in terms of those older societies based on warriors. Now, societies were based on feats of arms where you had to train since birth. You know what I mean? Well, not birth, but you know what I mean.
6 months, man. Come on.
Yeah, 6 months. Give them a chance since the age of 2 or 3 or whatever, right? So you had to like train as a warrior all your life.
Just briefly on that, right? This is a quick observation. We talk about the warrior and young, and a lot of travellers will get this. Sometimes we get backlash for it. But a lot of travellers put their young lads, they'll introduce them into boxing clubs at about 7 years old or 8 years old, to see if they like it, see if they take to it, and various other sports. They believe they have to be connected to something where it's competitive. I was wondering, that would be connected because the warriors would also do it young. Back then, they would teach them young, wouldn't they?
That
was part of the honour thing.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing was worth mentioning, there's about 33, 34, maybe 35 Irish travellers that at one stage or another in recent years that were world champions in boxing, from Tyson Fury right across the board. He comes from Irish traveller background. He is Irish traveller also. Their names various, and they're all travellers, all connected to Ireland. That's one small group, and also other sports, lots of other sports. Sorry, go on. Every time
no, that's interesting. You should go further. You can talk about that further because. The first thing that strikes me is that...
Well, we started off when we were young, the idea of it was that no one would beat you into the face. And we have that kind of saying, don't let no one beat you into the face.
Okay.
Because if you were fighting with someone travelling up and hit you, didn't hit them back, it'd be the worst thing in the world. A settled person could do it, but it wouldn't mean the same thing. It would have no meaning. No, you'd probably punch him back too, but it would have no value in it.
Yeah.
Where if the traveller did it, it was seen as a clang thing, it was seen as a name thing, and so it had to be sorted that way.
Okay, yeah, so that is interesting. It means that's what we're talking about. That whole the honor is not just about you; it's about your clan in general, and about their history, probably.
Your name and your history is everything.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And that's something we understand. We see a lot in Japanese things. So we're just using the Japan to illustrate that. People are very familiar with watching those kind of movies, and these things happen all the time. They think nothing of it when they see it in a Japanese movie.
Brad Pitt, I haven't forgotten you either, mate. That film Snatch. Get in contact with you. We'll make a good movie with you, mate.
But that's it. If they see the same things now, this is the problem, is seeing things through the lens, like we talked about before, about how that difference between how what people are like, how things really are, and how you're taught to think about them by the empire, if you know what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Like when we're, with Rory O'Moore, or that idea of the stuff to do with nomadism. What's a nomad? Whether the people are really nomad or
I would imagine, and only that's what I can do is imagine from the Japanese perspective. They have already been living in a world. How they know it's their world because they built it, they created it, they shared it, they managed it. All of a sudden, there's white Europeans. I'm going to throw you guys under the bus because I told you before, Ireland was even distinctively different from the rest of the European tribes, little known clans. From the Japanese perspective, these people came into the world with long sticks and bullets come out of them. So it wouldn't matter if you trained all your life as a warrior. It wouldn't matter what name you came from or how good you are.
Yes.
All of a sudden, some puke could come up with a gun and shoot you.
Yeah.
That's what. That's the world the Japanese were meeting.
Yeah. So that upended all those very ancient martial societies that had a martial element at its center. That upended that. The guns upended that. And it was the Europeans that really pushed the weapon, and it was the guns and cannon are very much behind the rise of empire, as we know in the modern world. So they were a massive threat to Japanese, and to say it very quickly, the Japanese shut that down. They managed. They were just about isolated enough and strong enough in themselves to they closed down the European access only through one little area, I think, and they controlled guns. They put gun control in on a level that's not been ever done since.
I think, believe it or not, the film we mentioned
basically banned them.
The movie Tom Hanks, Tom Cruise is in The Last Samurai. I was looking at a bit of a documentary on YouTube a while back on Japanese, and they talked about a guy called Adams. And Adams was from the Protestant community, and I'll tell you why that's interesting, because his mentality was different from the people who had already visited there, which were Christian mentality or Catholic.
Jesuits and things.
Yeah.
Like that.
So that's the mentality is played out there. But the movie was based on Tom Hanks washing up on and becoming merged into the Japanese culture. In other words, however you managed it, Tom Cruise, you swifted from your colonial mentality into the mentality of the people who were facing this. A bit like what you call him, your friend, W.B. Yeats. He absorbed that whole Celtic revival because now he could see from a Protestant perspective, he could see the Celtic perspective.
Yeah, he certainly tried anyway.
Yeah, well, yeah, he's tried. Sorry for chopping in.
Wasn't as successful as Tom Hanks, maybe.
No,
or not Tom Hanks. What's his name?
I forget his name now again. Tom Cruise.
Tom Cruise.
Yeah, he'll be in touch shortly.
Yeah, sorry, Tom Hanks. It wasn't you. First thing I'm going to say is that yes, as far as I'm aware, Irish tradition in the old days was about the age of 7. Warriors were made at the age of 7, roughly. In those days, I think they used to put them on horseback and tell them they had to break as many spears as they could against a target. So maybe you want to reinstate that at some point. But so that's interesting. The age thing you're talking about. The other thing is, yes, what were we saying? Bigger picture. Japanese banned guns directly to stop that. They knew what they meant to that kind of society. They were a direct threat to it.
What was happening between that? Say, like when the guns came first, is that people came out to murder the nicest people in the world, and they influenced the Japanese to use the guns. Was there Japanese now using guns also? Oh,
of course, yeah. They were they had a big series, didn't they, in the 16th century of near the end of the 16th century. Of course, a bit like Ireland, it went into complete meltdown and violence because the weapon, everyone was in an arms race, and every clan, and that system. When you add guns into a system of an honor-based system of warrior clans, like you were asking for trouble.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. You can imagine, and of course they were being used. Feed guns to this clan and give them to that guys and divide it. You know what I mean? And a
miniature arms race type thing.
Yeah, an ancient feuds between clans that might go back 1,000 years, where suddenly now we can get our revenge if we have guns and they don't, kind of thing, and stuff like this. You know what I mean? So it escalated into enormous battles. And the shogun, what do they call him? The emperor, and them trying to centralize the country and all that kind of stuff. There's a very famous battle. I think it ends at a very famous battle, the Sekigahara or something. Anyway, there'll be people out there who know more about Japanese culture than me, so I'm not quite sure. But shortly after that period,
the principle of short story, but I suppose in one way, not short story, is that here comes the white Europeans with their guns, forcing their way in. Decided then to sell arms to the clans because they knew they'd have to buy them because it'd be a clan race. Honor was gone, breaking down. Society, the fabrics of it were being crushed.
Yes.
At what point then did they say enough is enough with the guns? Or what happened? Was something that
I'm not sure the exact date, but I know that there's a major battle at Sekigahara which wipes out one whole faction of Japanese society. I think the society becomes quite centralized at that point, and is it the emperor or the shogunate? I can't quite remember. Issue an order to. They basically managed to shut down guns. Guns are manufacturing is banned, and the import of weapons from European sellers is also banned. They control Europeans just to I think it's the Dutch or somebody are allowed to have so many ships a year at just one port, and that's it. So it's very controlled. And Japan goes into an isolation for.
And Tom Cruise was their kind of almost European rep.
That's later.
Was it later?
That film is set 200 years later, roughly, when almost into the modern time, in the 1860s, and when 50s and 60s, when Japan realizes, I think an American cruiser of some sort, a big ship.
The Europeans came around the 1500s, was it first?
Originally, yeah. So a big American ship arrives in port, and that by this stage, technology has advanced so much that the Japanese realize they've got paper houses, and they've been living in this splendid isolation for 200 years. They've managed to keep society. They've managed to slow down the change and keep society more or less from their point of view intact, but it's stagnated a little bit. You know what I mean?
So in the 1500s, here comes Europeans with their guns. They rounded them up, got them off the island. They came back with bigger guns.
Yes.
200 years, later, culture was allowed to develop, but obviously it wasn't no match for the big tanks or out.
No, so they decide. Well, they see the disparity in the ship. They see that they're no match for that, so they're going to have to modernize because they're just going to be defeated if they did end up in a war. So they decide they're going to modernize on their own terms, and that's the period that that film portrays actually with Tom Cruise, because they bring Europeans in, but they're hiring them, if you know what I mean, in order to modernize their armies and create a modern state as they see it.
Isn't that what, and correct me if I'm wrong, isn't that what the clan systems here in Ireland did with religion of sorts? That they adapted it to a clan-based system, as opposed to adapting the whole Roman Catholic belief.
Exactly. Yes. Exactly.
So they were absorbing what was coming to them. They said, okay, if we were going to have the religion, let us make what we do with it.
Well, you're going way back there, and exactly. But there is evidence for that in the sense that the very first Christian things that come here seem to be organized a little bit like they had been in the Roman Empire. So,
where was that? You see, it's gone back way back then. When?
Going back to 4th century and 5th century in AD.
Flies, my friend.
Yeah. So they'd arranged little churches and dioceses, and they're supposed to have little bishops and that, but that just didn't work here because that was based on cities.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean. So pretty soon after that, the thing that becomes Irish Christianity, as you say, becomes what they call monastic Christianity, and it's monasteries and this will sound familiar, I think. Monasteries are basically run like clans, and each monastery, if it created another monastery with a group of monks, they become families. They're called familia or parochiae or something, but they're families of monasteries with satellite monasteries, and so they start to they mimic exactly the pattern of the clan.
Just quickly in that,
the clan system.
When we're talking about the clan system having their own monasteries, I want to say really get well soon to probably one of the greatest chieftains of travellers, particularly his own name, Michael McDonough in the UK. And believe it or not, Michael, your ancestors had a castle here in Sligo, which you probably know of. Better than that again, they also had their own monastery. What were the monasteries doing?
In the one in Ballindoon, is it?
Pumping out the bear.
Oh, yeah. That's right, yeah. That's a monk's major job.
Some of the greatest warriors of all time, when you talk about history books.
Yes.
That particular clan. So get well soon, Michael.
Oh, that's very true, yeah.
So,
1,000 years of it. We were at their one down in Ballindoon, weren't we?
Yeah, we were.
Yeah, we haven't put that one out, actually.
We'll talk more about that. Yeah, okay, so basically back to the Japanese perspective, right? So Japanese now met a European world open up to them.
Yes.
And over having their own mentality and their own culture, they said, okay, we have to accept that we have to move with the world, move with the times, but we do not accept what you're trying to tell us how to view the world. So we will take what you have and we'll adapt it to our mentality, our way of seeing the world, and we'll see how that goes. How did that go?
It went okay from their point of view. I mean, I'm going to leave out the hiccup, the world hiccup of World War II, which is a different matter. But that's but in terms of raw success, in terms of like how they modernize it, it's very. The Japanese are very successful at it in many ways. They do the same thing as but yeah. So they're confronted with the modern world. But what do? They create businesses and what we would call a sort of somewhat capitalist, a very capitalist economy. But they base it again. They can't help it. They're looking from their point of view of the world. They base it on clan systems as well. You
were telling me that the Japanese, I don't know if it's true or not, but say they've a multitude of businesses, like lots and lots of businesses. But say like it could be Toyota and there could be various other businesses, but they're not different companies. They're all clans, but linked into together.
So they kind of, exactly. So they're different.
So it'd be like to say the Sweeneys and the McDonoughs and the Wards and whoever other different clans, we decide to make in state-of-the-art wagons. We could clang together and create a business-like model like that.
So they disarmed the samurai in the 1860s, I think 70s, something like that. And they had to lay their weapons down, as it were. The society was altered, but a lot of the families didn't just get rid of clans, if you know what I mean. They didn't do that. They didn't break the society apart. They a lot of them moved into business and into various other forms of things. So yeah, and like you're saying though, the way they organize is very different to the West. They're organized along the ancient clan system that they had already. So those big ones, like what's the biggest one? Toyota is one of the biggest ones. Matsushita, and I think we looked them up.
It's endless as it goes on to.
They're called Kairetsu or something, aren't they?
Mitsubishi and everything. And
okay, so I was looking that up. All right, they're called Kairetsu. They're like big conglomerates, but each one has its own. Each one is a major clan at the top. The core kind of company. the directors of it has many other little satellite companies, and these companies would have directors from the main clans and that, and each one has its own company bank. So it'd be like a Toyota bank or a Matsushita bank or whatever, you know. And a lot of the companies even that we're familiar with, like, you know, Honda and Daihatsu and all these kind of things, and there's endless amounts of Japanese companies. Fujitsu, or are they Japanese?
But are also Fujitsu, that's right.
Yeah, could be.
But also not just in that, but creativity in the arts.
They're all part of the same. Yeah, a lot of them they're part of these big systems, which are clans, kind of like clan systems, because when you're a part of a family of companies like that, even though they might be making very different things, they might have heavy industry one side and car making and things like that, and then at the very other end they might be making toys or something, and digital products and cameras and what have you. But every little breakthrough in technology by any particular part of that system is shared amongst all the rest of them, so they have access to each other's technology is the deal. And also each company holds shares in the other companies, so they have this. Their mutual success is
benefit to all.
Of benefit to all of them. So it's strange. It's a little bit of a mixture between we call it a capitalist thing, but it's not like Western capitalism where it's absolute competition.
Yeah,
you know, everyone against everyone is the kind of philosophy in the West to some extent, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's very individual type, in of yourself type thing. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So you're supposed to, as individuals, you're supposed to do things, and of course we have, you know, but the Japanese brought through that clan thing, which means that within those systems, it's quite, I wouldn't quite call it socialist, but in a sense, within the system it is. The company banks give you preferential loans, and do you know what I mean?
They created their own version of capitalism that suits their mentality.
Yeah. It's a mixture of tradition and
and it's very similar.
Now, what we're talking about that for is because that never had a chance to develop in Ireland.
No.
The Irish history diverges in the 16th century completely from Japanese history, because we don't get to make a decision about guns. We don't get to slow down the change from the older form of society to the newer one. We don't get to say how that's going to be done. What we have instead is the empire comes in on top of us, and also the in cahoots with the kind of merchants of the cities that have decided that benefit most from that change in society. But the change in Ireland, the important thing about the change in Ireland is not who did what. The important thing is how it's done. There's no chance to adapt, and it's done through violence. And that lock of the struggle between the Irish clans and the state system that's trying to impose, without any room for negotiating that change, like what we described in Japan, means just never ends. If you know what I mean, until this day, in a sense, is what we're talking about.
Oh, exactly. And Dylan says the state and the empire. Again, these are all systems, and they're all based on mentality. That same system that's in Ireland. Sometimes I say this quite a lot about not just settled people, but it's quite a generalization I'm aware of. But more so, I'm talking about the mentality, because that's the same mentality that went to other countries. It's the same mentality that went to Japan, that enforced the same ways, colonial powers upon them. So when the Japanese see the white Europeans coming, we would have seen settled people coming. And for the English, we got a question. That's why a lot of Japanese products are top-notch. Have a sense of respect for their reputation and social standing. Unlike cheap Chinese Western BS made by probes and robber barons. My lord.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Strong opinion.
It is. I won't comment on the Chinese. I was like, Chinese make some probably good stuff as well, but I could get the there might be some truth in that. If your clan's reputation for thousands of years is on the line, in terms of literally the old style thing of on the battlefield, but now it's like the battlefield is like electronics or something.
Well, see, and again,
it actually makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
The only thing, the difference we keep referring to with ourselves in Japan is Japan had almost a natural flow of developing all them skills and them technologies, or adapting them to their own liking. Travellers didn't have that in Ireland. As Dylan said, even for 1600s, for many Irish people didn't have that option. So we were crushed down. So when, like I said before, when you've got that mentality coming at you, and they're telling you this is the way it's going to be, this is the way you have to see it, and you're resisting that. There's no time to sit down and be creative or to be able to build on our own ancient culture or create that space, because you're constantly attacked. And I suppose that'll be one difference between ourselves and the Japanese.
Yeah, and we also have to remember, and this might sound a little controversial, but we have to remember something very clearly, and that's that Japan, another big difference between us, one thing that is a big difference between us and Japan is that our capital city had always been, what we now call the capital, and other cities were in effect colonies from the start, if you know what I mean. So they had always been founded by foreigners, because we had not, we were, as we talked about before, we weren't living in that society. You know what I mean? So it'd be a bit like if Edo or Tokyo was run by the Chinese or the Mongols or something, you know, kind of way. And then it gives an inroad for that invasion. So what it means is that the urban culture, when we go to modernize in Ireland, we don't have the Irish towns to do that from, to some extent, except here. Yeah, but we were too isolated, so that's a different thing. You know
the Sligo.
Except in Sligo.
We must do the Sligo special soon. Why it's so special? Again, some of this,
all right.
People might think, and I'm sure they do, time to them, what the hell has any of this got to do with 2019? And what we are finding very, very, very difficult to say in this mentality, in this language, and again, remember, we had to learn this, and we've been deprived and cut off and been put on the run for hundreds of years, even including by the Irish state. In 1963, they issued a commission report how to civilize Irish travellers. And some of the stuff went into that was brutal. The outcomes were even far more brutal. So little on do we not have time to process and get over the traumas of English rule, we were inflicted even probably worse by the Irish state, because the Irish state were under the impression they were now the new Irish. This was what Irish would have been anyway without the British, with given absolute disregard to the real culture of Ireland, that was Irish travellers. So we became the embarrassment for the population of Ireland, who were the influence of colonisation. And again, this is quite evident when you think about it, when you change no political system, education system, and all these other systems. I mean, if these are the same systems that crushed your country, that nearly wiped out half the island, put apartheid laws and inflicted such great deal of pain on its own citizens, why wouldn't you want to change that? Would it make common sense? If we don't change it, it only means that we're thinking now in the mentality that came here. This also goes, I've seen this a couple of times on Twitter, Yellow Vest movement, renowned or known to be racist. I wouldn't disagree with that. But at the same time, I see genuine good people, like Angela Ray. I've never met the person, but I know the person's having serious issues with a state agency who took her child. And where did she go? And now she's labelled, and now everyone else gets labelled, although I just labelled the Yellow Vest racist, but I don't mind saying that because their rhetoric is racist. But at the same time, and this goes for other right-wingers, at the same time, when you retweet my posts and you use some of my content, I want you to understand that there is no racism in the clan system. That's a British English concept that materialized over time and became very scientific by the same mentality in America. We don't want no fascism. We don't need no fascism. Now, is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose, sorry, no.
It's good to get a disclaimer in.
Well, this is it. I suppose with the right-wing retweeting, I want you to also understand, listen to this, because this is the reality of Irish history. It's a reality because, one, we came from a clan system and we came from an organic building and creation, thousands of years. Our mentality hasn't changed from that. That's why we still have family and connections, so on and so forth. The only problem we have is a constant psychological attack by the settled community who genuinely believe themselves to be the civilized community and the normal community. And I'm not saying they're not civilized or they're not normal, but there was another civilization that existed before that. There was another kind of normal that existed before that.
So we were saying that we should probably say as well, though, that this has been a thing that's been, it's not that even with the settled community, it's not really their fault in the sense that it was kind of pushed since the 50s, 60s, since that report you're talking about, the 63 report. has pushed that agenda, hasn't it? Because of that misunderstanding partly misunderstanding, and it sort of suits certain people, maybe. But
here's an interesting one, and a lot of people, and sorry to interrupt you, will relate to this when you hear this. A lot of talk you very often hear on the radio, on the media, and all the people will all say the travellers in the 60s were much nicer people. You see, they used to come up and with the wagons, and people were friendly, and they come into houses and they talk, and there was music, and there was sharing, there was caring, there was a community. So what happened to that mentality? No one that was settled in travellers, but got on very well with each other. Something had to happen. So my theory is the 1963 report, they became a national policy that changed and altered absolutely everything across the board. After that, they set up homes, boarding schools that took only traveller children and put them into these homes. They had apartheid laws, and they created a turmoil. It's just people were illegal to be a traveller. So no matter where you were in Ireland, you were illegal. And that went back hundreds of years with the clan system.
Yeah, so it hadn't really changed, unfortunately.
Yeah, and again, you're right. There is a lot of victims in all this, because this is all psychological. The whole term racism is psychological. I know I'm getting a bit fired up now because I don't know why, but anyhow. It's all psychological. So we want to say in one way, I feel there's people on the racist side, the wrong side, whatever side they might be on. I'm hoping some way and somehow or another, some of the people can be rescued, because they shouldn't be stuck with a label if they didn't truly fully understand.
Well, I think people's interest in interest in history is a good thing. An interest in your culture is a good thing. Wanting to know about the past is obviously a good thing. I think that in Ireland it's very necessary, and I think that we can try to turn the story around. The more accurate we get it, the less problems we'll have in those areas.
I suppose the other way around, and from a traveller, I think about it like this in this terms, as crazy as it might be, and this not to take anything away from anyone else. Think of Irish travellers as being the Japanese culture in an Irish society. That's similar. Our worldviews was well to be Japanese in Ireland. Same with African Americans, because we went through the segregation. That doesn't mean we had it much worse. It's not about better and worse. We know that from any other group apart from the clan system in Ireland, the shock of absorption would have been far worse than we had inflicted, because we were prepared for. We were engaging in battles and fights. If you were from Aborigine country, if you were from, Australia, and you were Aborigine, if you were Native Americans, Maori, you're a whole completely different world. People that you've never seen before in your life were turning up on your shores, gunning down people and wiping out villages. So that's a huge difference.
Maori did fairly well, though.
Yeah, well, Maoris are also warriors.
Yes, and clans.
And clans.
And similar, yeah.
We're going to New Zealand soon, my friends.
They also have a lot of the same problems, and that's where we get back to the actual, back to the same theme, if you know what I mean. Is that, for example, Maori, which we weren't going to talk about, but we can take anyone. It doesn't have to be Japanese. Like Maori, a lot of the same issues in New Zealand.
Because if you put up all on one side, if you put all the Maoris, the travellers, all the Indigenous people, and a lot of set people, but if you put us all on that side of the line, we all see the world differently to the way you see it. But your way of world is accusing us of being savages, but yet this way of the world is killing people not to be civilized, which is a pure contradiction anyway. It's a constant mowing down of bad.
Yeah, we should remember that. The stories told now are not the same. I mean, the states themselves in the beginning of the empire was born in violence, if you know what I mean. So that's the point, isn't it?
Yeah,
they would go in, and then response that comes back, they claim then, okay, they're savages. So we talked a bit about that before, though. That's an old trick of the Roman, going back to Roman times and all that.
Bit like with the Christianity thing, everyone outside Christianity was paganism.
Yeah.
Everybody outside the cities or this kind of colonial power were savages. It's
psychological, yeah. So but like I say, for example, to stick with the Maori for a second, you get the same idea. Another society that I don't know a whole lot about, but at the same time I understand that there are a lot of the same problems with. And these are right throughout Irish society, not just with travellers, but of course travellers are at the front end in terms of the state. Problems with alcoholism and dispossession and lack of access to stuff and all that kind of thing. But that disconnect, and this is what we're talking about. That what I wanted to contrast was the way that we understand, say, in an intact society like Japan, we see. Everyone in the world has this admiration for there was a downside to their society. There's also an upside, though, in the sense that a lot of people can have an understanding and an admiration, even for things that involve violence in the past, because that's everybody's past has violence in it. But those things, they have that status in Japan to this day. So martial arts schools, for example, still exist that come from the Middle Ages. the Japanese warrior tradition is admired all over the world. The same thing doesn't happen as much in Ireland because it's been crushed this way, transmogrified, and then also as part of the thing, it's as part of the that conflict we're talking about. As part of conflict, as they say, what do they say? The first casualty in war is truth, if you know what I mean. So it takes away that idea. Any outbursts of Irish martial traditions that you referred to earlier, the only one, the ones left, for example, are ones to do with boxing that travellers still maintain, and that other parts of Irish society to some degree maintain those connections, but they're disparaged and looked down on. It's the exact opposite to how it's treated. And obviously the more sophisticated the martial arts schools and that didn't survive in Ireland, but the mentality did. You know what I mean? But the as you say, when you're pinned against the wall and you're hiding in a bog or you're stuck on the side of the road, worrying about how you're going to survive from day to day, you don't have the luxury to maintain a sophisticated school of swordsmanship or anything like that.
Or slashhookism.
Or slashhookism. And that's, again, this is where that comes in, because we're talking about the tradition of arms. With people look at the traveller thing and would say, well, why are they using weapons like this? That's savagery. But then they wouldn't say the same thing when you do katas as a Japanese warrior with some sort of long-handled axe or something, which they do as well.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean. Now, that's okay, but what's the difference? The difference is that one is involved in battle to this day of mentalities, if you know what I mean, and that has to be painted in the terms of savagery. In Japan, the schools survived, so that's now become a ritualized thing to do with self-improvement.
See, unfortunately, I think my theory is that when England went away and done all the colonization, even when they came home, they didn't think much of it, because for one, they started off thinking it was perfectly ritual and it was okay, and some of they knew was bad, but they didn't think themselves as colonizers. The people that faced them recognized the English as colonizers. With Japan, they put the colonizers away. Eventually, they came back. Eventually, they adapted mentality to their liking. In Ireland, that colonization or that psychological war of colonial power has never switched off. Every other part of the world. Now, the Irish set people have this illusion, and I don't mean to be rude, an illusion that they're living in a free state, free republic, and all this kind of stuff. But we're saying as travellers that our culture, our history predates that mentality. And if that mentality hadn't changed under the systems, are we not still being attacked by a psychological colonial war? Another question. I know Angela personally well. Genuine, lovely woman. I've no doubt she is. Left and right wing puppets like to falsely equate tribalism in the tribal lifestyle sense with racism for their respective agendas.
Yeah, I think I get that.
I don't get it.
Yeah, I do. I understand. I think that's just saying. Well, that's to do with what we would talk about. This is why we would be addressing some of this, because we're saying that when it's unclear what Ireland was like in the past, and that it leaves it open for people with other agendas, not historical agenda, but with not about the exploring the history to see what we can find out. You know what I mean? But they're already have an ideology. They want their right wing or their left wing even, and it leaves it open for them to
pick at it,
pick bits that suit them, and say,
history.
yeah. This proves that we're correct. This Ireland, like that example. Ireland was only ever white. It was only ever had these many people in it. It only had this, and therefore they hold that up to people as if like, that's why we shouldn't have immigrants, or that's why, I don't want to get into all of that stuff.
Well, I will say it in very clearly, that we are the living proof on the Western part of the world, in a Western society, in a Western civilization, in an English-speaking mentality. We are the last of the Irish clan system. And for whatever bit is left in our mentality, that can have time to grow through the arts if we were given that opportunity. But instead, we are constantly attacked. Even in 1992, the Irish state erected a law that made it illegal for a traveller to be a traveller. In other words, you could move us from anywhere 5 miles of a radius, no matter where we were. What kind of law is that? Just once you're alive, once you wake up, you could move. That's the kind of attack we're. And it's not necessarily that the Irish state are full of bad, evil people. That's their mentality.
Well, they're locked into it.
That's their mentality.
Yeah. Once you understand the origin of that state, if you know what I mean, and the origin of the systems, if you know what I mean, once we understand them, we can try to change them a bit. If we don't understand them, there's nothing we can do. We, as you said before, people think that's just the way it is, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But if we hold up a mirror, like by using something like Japan or something, where we see that a culture that's very different to Western culture, but has also succeeded in a different way, even in the modern world, in fact, makes, better electronics than we do, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So how do they do that? And so we've gone into a bit of that on purpose, because we would understand that if Ireland had developed differently, what would it be like is a good question. You know what I mean? But it also means that we have to get past that propaganda of the idea that, okay, so, people living in systems like clans and that, but that does not mean that that's inevitably a bad thing or a ancient thing that's no longer necessary in the world.
I think, and this is it.
Because progress is not just on one line.
Like, we're not going around dressed in Viking or Celtic and chariots and have fights or anything. We'll have fights, no doubt, but it won't be like that.
We do that already.
Yeah, we're doing that already. So. No, but the point, I suppose, is that, it's not about dragging people back in ancient times. We're going to live here. This is the best moment of my life. Everybody else has to move to that particular point in history where it was good for one person or one country, one client. It doesn't work like that. We're saying, from what happened in the past, it's still killing us today because it hasn't changed. It doesn't mean we haven't changed, but we're not even getting a chance to develop or now to grow, allowed to integrate on fair or just terms. That's an impossibility. A couple of things I want to mention here, because I don't want you to think I come on here talking about this and not mention about traveller violence. A couple of statistics written down somewhere, but I should know them by now. But there's Irish travellers make up about 7% of the Irish general population. And this is coming from some of the stuff Thomas McCann did on a mental health talk lately. 50% of Castlereagh prison is made up with traveller inmates. Another question. We'll take the question in one moment, because I think I want to talk about the statistics on travel.
Yeah, go ahead.
Basically, a lot of them for petty crime, right? But once you take away from that image for a moment, traveller violence, traveller crime. Now, if you go to America, you'll see the very same statistics with African Americans, with a high incarceration. If you go to Australia, you'll see the exact same figures and statistics with Aboriginal people. If you go to New Zealand, you'll see the exact same with the Maori. And if you go to South Africa, you'll see the same with South Africans. And if you go to other parts of the world, Canada, and anywhere else that was colonized, you will always see the Indigenous people, the minorities, showing up high for criminal activity, whatever it might be. But that's not because they were like that. That's because the system that approaches them and makes it an impossibility for them to be themselves creates the laws that tells them they are criminal or not. Now, we all know the rights and wrongs in life. But I suppose what we're saying is that if we can take a step back from colonialism, because colonialism, in my opinion, started here in Ireland and it spread throughout the world, and they had a lot of experimental time to get it right and tweak it over time. Again, it's not to take anything away from any other group, but we need more talks on traveller mental health as in traveller historical healing. A lot has happened to a lot of people on this island from century to century to century. Whether it be through the famine, whether it be through conflicts, through troubles in the north, whatever it might be. A lot of violence, a lot of social issues, and a lot of psychological issues have developed from that. Also included with that is the state violence of instrumental in the destruction of traveller life, and that's even to the point of psychological destruction. So I think that's where we see all these health problems coming from, but also that we have a connection with all these other Indigenous groups.
And I think if I could add, if you make progress on that, you'd actually open it up for a lot of people, not just for travellers, actually.
I would hope that, and again, and I say this dearly, to all Indigenous groups, only because I look like Casper the Ghost. I'm not trying to take anything away. We have a very long history in this island, went on for thousands of years, and not even on the island, not just this island, because it was a mentality. We also operate through Scotland and other parts of the world. But this island became very particular, very special, because it was the first country ever to be colonized by the English outside of England. So we were the first to get that blessed. You can never beat the Irish, eh?
I'll be there. Chariots.
Mad Max style chariots would be awesome.
Yeah, there you go. Can you do something about that? You
I'll tell you. This
You want
is,
to talk about chariots?
Yeah, absolutely. We sulky racing. You know, this only became a phenomenon lately with traveller culture, and they only made it up. That goes back how many hundreds, thousands, maybe.
It goes back. Chariot was invented about
3,000
years. No, 4,000 years. Yeah.
And did Ireland
3,000 years? The first carts, but then I was watching something about. We get into detail. The chariot, very sophisticated thing. You know, the war chariot.
travel wagons? You ever see them when they're painted up and done and designed? A lot of pride goes into them.
Well, them's are wagons, but the sulky racing is actually more like chariots, the two-wheeled vehicle.
Oh no, I got that. I'm just saying the skill that goes into something that you build and own.
Oh, absolutely, yes,
handcraft.
Yes. Sorry, yeah, absolutely, yeah. So yeah, no, that's
imagine the whole family in the sulky.
Yeah, no, but that's it.
But
no,
was there an Irish chariot found in this country?
Well, I don't think we found a chariot yet. That's one of the big mysteries. We haven't found a chariot yet, but there's many depictions of chariots, and of course the central epic in Irish history, the Cuchulainn and all of that, it all takes place on the warriors are all driving chariots, if you know what I mean.
All right, so they had the chariot image in their head for the clans anyway.
The Celts are well known for chariots.
But chariots wouldn't have lasted that long anyway. We're not a long time ago.
It's very difficult in Ireland for anything like that to last, yeah. But we haven't found one. It doesn't mean we won't find one. We're looking for one.
Yeah, if you see one,
yeah,
maybe you could get in touch and we'll go investigate.
I think chariots would have been used in Ireland in very specific places. You had to kind of arrange the battlefield. Obviously, it's the case that in a lot of places,
I could have done for sport rather than.
That's what I mean. You would just sink in a bog if you went the wrong way, right?
Yeah.
So let's be honest. But there is parts of the country where those were definitely more easy to use than others, and I think that there's a lot of reason to believe actually that the big henges that they have, they're Bronze Age henges and things like this. They're very much arranged like stadiums. They may have been used for horse racing and chariot racing.
That's quite possible. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
But look, if you think about it, even today when travellers are still practicing in sulky racing, but have to use main roads. Now people get critical of that again because they can't understand. But if we had the facilities, we had the places to go and carry out our charity races and all that kind of stuff.
Well, look at have you seen the one in Rome, the Circus Maximus?
Circus Maximus.
Yeah.
I haven't.
Okay. There's not much to see now, but what is it in that film? I can't remember the name of it now. The big, it's got a sharp turn at each end, it's a big long oval. The Circus Maximus was for chariot racing.
Oh, what's them? Spartans and so on and so forth, they were using them, was it?
Yeah, no.
Was it Kirk Douglas in the film with the chariots?
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Kirk Douglas. Yeah, Michael Douglas, if you're watching, we'll talk to give you a mention too.
Yeah, so anyway, the Romans, there's another example. The Romans had become a big empire, fine, but they kept their tradition of chariot racing, if you know what I mean. And there it was. They built a big stadium for it. I suppose what we're saying is that in Ireland, like what we talked about, we never got a chance. That would have continued. It never got a chance to continue. That had to be on. That was because the conflict.
Ben-Hur, was it? Damn, I shouldn't have pointed my finger. I could have just taken that answer and gone with it.
Yeah, Ben-Hur, thank you.
Damn it. Anyway.
Exactly. Because of that thing we're talking about, it was never allowed to develop in Ireland. So it was on the prescribed list of bad things that happened.
Another one that would fit in there, right? People say, well, so, speaking...
We needed a Circus Maximus in Dublin.
Oh, yeah, in Sligo. We should try to get a museum in Sligo too. Yeah. Would that be a good idea?
Don't get me started.
But
museum is needed, yes.
That's the thing with Travision is that hopefully sometime we do create that opportunity investment to show your world through the traveller mentality, not through this language. I mean, this is not my language, I'm conscious of it. And I think when settled people try to make films of real old, they don't get a they get a more I don't want to insult it, but it's not very Irishy. So I was often wondering with a traveller mentality going through the arts, we could create an industry here and a half in Ireland. But anyhow, these are other topics and subjects we can talk about in time to come.
It's a whole other subject, yeah. But it does lead to that. That's the thing. We're talking about countries that any country, even England, for example, that has access to its past, has a more sophisticated media in terms of I don't know, Robin Hood. They make that every 10 years, that kind of way. But we were very little coming out of Ireland so far. We're going to change that, obviously.
Yeah, I think the world is waiting for this country that proclaims to be the fighting Irish and the scholars and the saints and all these ancient mythical warriors. All you got so far is not what you got. I mean, settled communities got so far as Fair City. Like, Jesus, give us a bit of funding. We could do a lot better than that. Now, before I go, because Dylan has been instrumental in helping me in terms of understanding the framework of what have happened. I already had a lot of know-how inside me through who I am, I guess, and my experiences and how I've seen the world and these different systems. But in terms of getting a framework around the history, all of this is factual. None of this is made up. So with that, I want to just do something.
What's that? Oh.
This is a samurai sword practice. It's a wooden one. Now, I double checked to ask, was it, before I handled it. So it's absolutely that. Now, I can't give it to Dylan as a last samurai because, for one, he's not a samurai. Two, I don't have that right to give him the sword. And I forgot to bring my slash hook. So what I'm going to do is present this samurai mock sword. I would never present a real one to him. As the last Traveller Clan member. Will you accept?
Oh yeah. Thanks very much.
You're a bit disappointed, yeah?
No.
Okay, that'll be 50 euros, mate.
Yes.
You remember. Folks, we're coming up to closing time again. Has either of you seen that float like a butterfly? I haven't watched it, and as far as I know, and I'll tell you what, look at it, and this is the truth, Brad Pitt and a couple of you guys I will be coming to eventually. When you come into the movies, you were not looking at travellers. You were, but you were looking through the mentality of somebody who despises travellers. If you want to give us that camera and some of your acting skills, we'll create some movies. We'll make Lord of the Rings and all these look like, well, they were brilliant movies. What can I say about them? Who is the better looking man? I think they're talking about me and you, is it? What a bizarre question. Why would anyone ask a stupid question like that?
I have no idea. We'd have to.
It's pure obvious.
Yeah.
We're like the Irish version of Ant and Dec. I think if we ever get an opportunity to do the arts, I think we could change Ireland in brilliant ways because, like I said, we're straight off the bat anti-fascism, anti-racism, but we're also anti-bullshit. So when the left and other political persuasions, the centre, right, it doesn't matter. That's a political game that's within a settled mentality as far as I'm concerned. So that doesn't mean I'm an anarchist or anything like that. There's nothing wrong with anarchism. I have no doubt there isn't. But my point would be that, just fund us. I don't know how you're going to do it. You have a PayPal account? No, just joking. Okay, it's 6 o'clock. Dylan, why were we talking about Japanese culture one more time?
We're using because we want to see what happens in a society that's very different but has some similarities to Ireland in order to explain how Ireland might have developed if it had not been rolled over by colonial, very, very hostile colonial system that is still that elements of are still in operation to this day in the country.
And with that, I will say that there's still that glimmer of hope that we still can do that through Irish travellers. And I don't expect Irish travellers to know all of this and feel all of this. But hopefully in time we can find other ways to relay this message that has a way that they might be able to sink in with people.
We've I think people know we have a long and a very rich history in Ireland, and it's there, to be belongs to everybody on the island, and it's there to be mined and to inform us, culture and whatever. But we can't do it. It doesn't belong to any one crowd or whatever. But we can't do it. We need to get the story straight to release the. Yeah. So anyway, hopefully we're getting in the right direction.
And again, once again, to the Japanese, you have a wonderful culture, beautiful culture. You're the land of the rising sun, and we're the clans of the setting sun. And hopefully someday we meet and we talk. Have a good evening. Take care, my friends.
It's traditional at this stage.
Yeah, it has to be. I wouldn't mind.